All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, little did I know when I wrote an entire radar on Russia yesterday that I would be back right the next day. But unfortunately, the content gods served this one up on a platter, and I just had to break it all down for you. I alluded a bit to this yesterday, but under the surface of a lot of other news, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, they put out a report on foreign intelligence interference in the 2020 election. Okay. The report found that Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence operation to attack Joe Biden, and critically also found that the Islamic Republic of Iran also undertook an aggressive effort to undermine Trump's candidacy. Go ahead and guess which one of those the mainstream media picked up and shouted from the rooftops. You guessed it, Russia, Russia, Russia. You wouldn't even know the Iranians were mentioned if you didn't go looking for it. But the Russia obsession aside, what was really disturbing was to see how even today, years removed from it all, Russiagate has absolutely poisoned the brains of many elite liberals who see Putin and Russians behind every corner and still make outlandish claims about Russian interference, which are not bounded in reality at all. Even after the P-tape and the dossier and the Mueller investigation hype and more, they cannot help themselves from overreaching. The worst overreach that we saw during the 2020 election was that the Hunter Biden laptop story. Now look, you can think Rudy Giuliani is a sketchy dude. I agree with you. You can think much of the information wasn't that important in the grand scheme of the election. Said that a lot here. You can think a lot of things. One thing, though, that you can't is that the laptop was fake or fabricated in any ways. And yet, that's exactly what the elite media ran with at the time. We saw constant stories like this one from Politico of senior intelligence officials and more saying that the Hunter Biden laptop story had, quote, all the classic earmarks of Russian information operation. The basic crux of the response was this. The laptop might be real, but its existence could be Russian. Therefore, it means it probably is Russian, which means that nothing gleaned from the emails is legitimate. It was gaslighting of the highest order. Sadly, it worked. But even though Biden won the election, they just can't drop it. And that's exactly what we saw yesterday from several high-profile people in media. Top among them was S.V. Date. He's a White House correspondent at the Huffington Post who highlighted a section of the report and said, quote, hey, New York Post, and everyone else who got suckered into the ridiculous Hunter Biden laptop story, take a bow, implying that the intelligence community had confirmed that. There's just a problem. Report didn't say that at all. It said, quote, Russian intelligence published disparaging content about President Biden, including stories centered on his son. Stories about his son are not the same thing as a laptop story at all. There's a lot of stories. Can't we all just sit and say, look, if the intel community had evidence that the laptop was supplied by Russian intelligence, wouldn't they just come out and say so? In fact, they would, and outright came out and said the opposite at the time. Let's take a trip down memory lane in case you all forgot.
And unfortunately, in this case, it is Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, who, as you pointed out on Friday, said that the intelligence community believes that Hunter Biden's laptop and the emails on it are part of some Russian disinformation campaign. Let me be clear. The intelligence community doesn't believe that because there's no intelligence that supports that. And we have shared no intelligence with Chairman Schiff or any other member of Congress that Hunter Biden's laptop is part of some Russian disinformation campaign. It's simply not true.
Should be put to bed, right? Nope, didn't matter. Didn't stop reporter Patrick Tucker of Defense One from tweeting about the report, quote, in case you're still wondering if the Hunter Biden laptop story came from the Kremlin, ODNI's new unclassified report says yes. This claim, an extraordinary one, is completely false. Facts don't matter to these people, do they? Within hours of sending his false tweet, Patrick's claim were picked up everywhere. From MSNBC's Chris Hayes, even to Ben Collins of NBC News, which is especially ironic because Ben Collins' literal job is to report on and monitor misinformation online. He's that type to lurk on a QAnon forum and tweet out their crazy musings as indicative of real national news coverage. Guess the guy can't actually spot disinformation very well. But I digress. Eventually, Tucker did delete his tweet, but not after it was exposed to hundreds of thousands of people. And even in defeat, he had to add that while the report doesn't actually say the Hunter Biden laptop story was from the Kremlin, that many of the same players were involved in pushing Russian disinformation. So, quote, it doesn't expressly mention Hunter Biden, but it does mention the names of several folks who we know to be a source of accusations against the Biden family. Got it. Again, It's just outright lies spread by mainstream journalists, some of the people tasked with monitoring misinformation who even fall for it. And it would be hilarious if it didn't have profound implications for the lack of standards in our media and in terms of the policy outcomes that I talked about yesterday. Russiagate wasn't just an extinction-level event for the credibility of the mainstream media. It poisoned the minds of millions of people to think conspiratorially, and it irrevocably damaged American foreign policy for many years to come. It's crazy, Crystal, that even at the time when you have the director of national intelligence, he's coming out, he's like, this is not Russian disinformation. Then they put out a report, has one line where they say, yeah, they push stories about his son. There's plenty of stories. Didn't cover them all. There's a lot. Trust me. And they used that to say that the Hunter Biden laptop story itself was a Russian plan. They can't let it go. They just make these outlandish and false claims. And even Chris Hayes got in on this. I mean, It's craziness. And it's just spread. There's no cost to tweeting out these completely false claims. And everybody just moves on. And it's like, we shouldn't move on. This is insanity.
Yeah, there's a lot to go into here. I noted right away when this intelligence report came out, the framing of it from the media was so interesting.
I know.
There were a couple things. First of all, obviously, all the emphasis was on Russia.
Right.
But a secondary emphasis was on, but China didn't get involved. With the implication being like, oh, all the interference was on behalf of Donald Trump. But they didn't mention the Iran at all. And then I also saw some framing that was like, well, the Russians got involved, but they didn't change anything technically. So the election is legitimate, right? So there was like an over-the-top emphasis to make sure it'd be like, Biden won and it was legitimate. So this is totally different than last time around. So that framing was all really interesting. And then this laptop thing is so ridiculous. It's like cartoonish. And Glenn's point, I think, is actually really important because let's say that this intelligence report did say that the Hunter laptop story was Russian disinformation. Let's say it did not remotely say anything like that, but let's just pretend for a second that it did. Even then, you don't just take whatever the intelligence community tells you and run with it like it's the gospel.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, that is what skepticism is supposed to be. What, you think these people have never lied to us? They lie to us all the damn time. It's practically their job description. I mean, that is what they do. So even if it was in this report, you should still be careful. You should still be skeptical. You should still be looking at the evidence. And then the last thing that I'll say about this is, look, if you thought that the laptop and the emails and whatever were fake, then you, with your large news organizations, could have investigated that. You could have looked into it, talked to the people who were sending the emails, say, hey, is this accurate? But they didn't bother to do that. They didn't care. They just wanted to run with this, like, has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation without actually looking in to verify whether the emails were true or false. And again, look, if you were watching this show at the time, we went out of our way to say, look, most of what the right is running within this, we don't actually think, most of it's not really new. It's treading ground that people already have tread. But the American people get to decide that for themselves, whether they think this is a significant story. And it's not your job as the news media to decide what they deserve to see and understand and what they don't.
Yeah, I actually even remember the morning it came out. And I was like, it doesn't seem that
we talked about it. We're like,
And then Twitter blocked it. And then we had to, I was like, all right, now it's like this huge story. It's like a cultural story. Tech is getting involved. And then the Russian claims start coming out. They're the ones who turned it into a much bigger problem. It's
Absolutely.
Like you said, they went to all these Russian information experts. Why didn't they ever go to the Biden campaign and say, is this true or not? And then the Biden campaign, guess what they never said? That it's not true. Which means what? Which means it is true. It's just so easy in order to see their games. I mean, it still is one of the most disgraceful episodes in media, but then the follow-up in order to try and still say that it was fake. Despite all of this, the guy won the election, and they still can't let it go. It will always be embedded within their DNA.
Truly amazing.
All right, I'm looking forward to your radar next, Crystal.